A nation divided, the deportation crisis. The Trump administration's controversial deportation of 137 Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador has sparked outrage and legal challenges. This event, occurring in March 2025, has further inflamed the debate surrounding immigration policy in the United States. The administration claims these deportations are necessary for national security, citing the migrants' alleged ties to the notorious Tren de Aragua gang. However, critics argue that these claims are unsubstantiated and that the administration is using fear-mongering tactics to justify its actions. At the heart of this controversy lies a fundamental disagreement about the role and authority of the judicial system. U.S. District Judge James E. Boasberg issued a temporary restraining order barring the administration from deporting the Venezuelan migrants. The administration, however, proceeded with the deportations, arguing that the order was issued after the migrants had already left U.S. airspace. This defiance of a court order has raised serious concerns about the separation of powers and the rule of law. The deportation of these Venezuelan migrants is not an isolated incident, but rather part of a broader pattern of the Trump administration's disregard for judicial rulings. This pattern has been evident in various areas, from immigration to environmental regulations. The administration's actions have led to accusations of authoritarianism and have further eroded public trust in the government. The situation raises fundamental questions about the future of American democracy and the balance of power within the U.S. government. A law from centuries past, the Alien and Sedition Acts. The Trump administration's decision to invoke the 1798 Alien Enemies Act to justify the deportation of Venezuelan migrants has drawn sharp criticism from legal scholars and human rights advocates. This law, passed during a time of war with France, grants the president sweeping powers to detain and deport non-citizens deemed enemy aliens. Critics argue that the law is outdated, irrelevant to the current situation, and ripe for abuse. The Alien Enemies Act has been used sparingly throughout history, most notably during World War II when it was used to justify the internment of Japanese Americans. This dark chapter in American history serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of granting unchecked power to the executive branch, particularly during times of heightened fear and xenophobia. The Trump administration's decision to invoke this controversial law has raised concerns about the potential for similar abuses of power. The administration's reliance on the Alien Enemies Act highlights a troubling trend of circumventing established legal channels to achieve its policy objectives. Instead of working within the existing immigration framework, the administration has repeatedly sought to bypass Congress and the courts, eroding the checks and balances that are fundamental to a functioning democracy. The use of this law is a blatant attempt to sidestep accountability and due process, undermining the very principles upon which the United States was founded. A judge's gavel. Boasberg's restraining order. Judge Boasberg's temporary restraining order, issued on March 21, 2025, was intended to halt the deportation of the Venezuelan migrants and allow for a thorough legal review of the administration's actions. The order cited concerns about the migrants' due process rights and the potential for them to face persecution or torture upon their return to Venezuela. Despite the order, the Trump administration proceeded with the deportations, claiming that the migrants had already left U.S. territory. The administration's defiance of a court order represents a direct challenge to the authority of the judiciary and raises serious questions about its commitment to the rule of law. This act of defiance is not an isolated incident, but rather part of a broader pattern of the Trump administration's attempts to undermine the judiciary and consolidate power in the executive branch. This pattern has been evident in the administration's attacks on judges who have ruled against its policies and its efforts to install loyalists on the federal bench. The administration's actions have drawn condemnation from legal experts across the political spectrum, who warn that such disregard for the judiciary could have long-lasting consequences for American democracy. The judiciary plays a crucial role in upholding the Constitution and protecting individual rights. When one branch of government disregards the rulings of another, it undermines the very fabric of our democratic system. International implications and the Salvadoran Agreement. The Trump administration's decision to deport the Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador has also drawn criticism for its potential human rights implications. El Salvador, while geographically closer to Venezuela than the United States, is grappling with its own set of challenges, including gang violence, poverty, and political instability. Critics argue that deporting vulnerable individuals to such an environment could put them at risk and violate U.S. obligations under international law. The agreement with El Salvador, brokered by the Trump administration, raises further concerns about the outsourcing of U.S. immigration enforcement and the potential for human rights abuses. Under the agreement, El Salvador will receive $6 million in aid to house approximately 300 Venezuelan migrants for 1 year. This arrangement has been criticized as a way for the Trump administration to circumvent U.S. legal obligations and shift the responsibility for asylum seekers onto a country ill-equipped to handle the influx. The international community has expressed concern over the Trump administration's handling of the Venezuelan migrant crisis. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has called on the United States to uphold its obligations under international refugee law and ensure that individuals seeking asylum have access to fair and efficient procedures. The deportation of these migrants to El Salvador raises serious questions about the Trump administration's commitment to international law and its willingness to cooperate with global partners to address shared challenges.